September 17, 1944, 14 to 35 hours, RAF Manston Airfield, Kent, England. Flight Lieutenant Thomas "Tommy" Ashford stood in the debriefing room, watching the new pilot salute the group captain. Something was wrong. The salute itself was textbook perfect. Hand at the correct angle, fingers extended and joined, thumb aligned. But the timing was off. A fraction too crisp, a fraction too mechanical. Most pilots who'd just survived 3 combat missions over occupied France didn't salute like they were on parade at Sandhurst. They saluted like exhausted men, grateful to be alive. Tommy felt his stomach tighten. The new pilot, Flying Officer James Richardson, according to his service record, had arrived 4 days ago with impeccable credentials, papers from RAF Biggin Hill, transfer orders signed by Air Vice Marshal, even a convincing Midlands accent. But that salute, that damn salute. Before we continue with Tommy Ashford's incredible story, we need your help to keep these forgotten heroes alive. If you're already hooked by what you're hearing, hit that like button right now. It tells YouTube to share this with more people who care about real history. Subscribe to this channel so you never miss another story of courage and innovation from World War II. And here's something we love. Drop a comment below and tell us where you're watching from. Your country, your city. We have viewers from Buenos Aires to Berlin, from Manila to Montreal. Are you a veteran? Did your grandfather serve? Do you have a connection to this war? We want to hear from you. Now back to RAF Manston, September 1944, where Tommy Ashford was about to make a discovery that would expose one of the most audacious Nazi infiltration attempts of the entire war. Tommy Ashford was nobody special. 24 years old, 5'9", from a coal mining family in Nottinghamshire. His father had worked underground for 32 years. Tommy had been expected to follow him down into the darkness after finishing school at 16. Instead, in 1939, 2 weeks after war was declared, he'd lied about his age and joined the RAF. Not as a pilot, his eyesight wasn't good enough, but as a ground crew technician specializing in aircraft recognition and intelligence briefings. For 5 years, Tommy had briefed pilots before missions and debriefed them after. He'd learned to read men, learned to spot when someone was lying about what they'd seen over Germany, learned to identify the subtle signs of combat stress, fear, and exhaustion. He'd memorized every aircraft profile in the RAF recognition manual, British, American, German, Italian. He could identify a Focke-Wulf 190 from a Messerschmitt 109 at 800 yards by silhouette alone. His gift was noticing details that others missed. The problem had started 3 weeks earlier, on August 28, 1944. Between August 28th and September 17th, 7 pilots from various RAF squadrons had been reported missing under suspicious circumstances. Not shot down, not captured, simply missing. 4 from RAF Tangmere, 2 from RAF Biggin Hill, 1 from RAF Northolt. All of them had disappeared after landing at temporary forward airfields in recently liberated France. All of them had been last seen walking toward debriefing tents. All of them had vanished without trace. MI5 suspected infiltration. German intelligence, the Abwehr, was known to be desperately trying to place agents inside Allied airbases as the front lines collapsed eastward. The theory was simple and terrifying. Kidnap Allied pilots, steal their identities, infiltrate the airfields, gather intelligence on bomber routes and fighter tactics. Flight Lieutenant Michael Chen had been the first one Tommy personally knew. Chen was from Manchester, 26 years old, a Hurricane pilot who'd survived Dunkirk and the Battle of Britain. He and Tommy had played cards together every Thursday night for 2 years. Chen always talked about opening a restaurant after the war, nothing fancy. Just good Chinese food and English breakfast side by side. Best of both worlds, Tommy, he'd say, grinning. Egg and chips next to char siu bao. Chen disappeared on September 3rd at a temporary airstrip near Amiens. His Hurricane was found. His logbook was found. His identification papers were found. Michael Chen was never found. Tommy had received the news while eating breakfast in the mess hall. Powdered eggs, bitter tea, toast with margarine. He'd sat there for 20 minutes, fork suspended halfway to his mouth, unable to move. The eggs went cold. The tea went cold. Someone eventually took the plate away. That night, Tommy made a promise to the empty chair where Chen used to sit. He would find out what happened. The pattern was maddeningly consistent. September 5th. Flight Officer David Morrison, RAF Tangmere, disappeared near Beauvais, age 23. From Edinburgh. Engaged to a nurse named Sarah. Wedding planned for December. September 9th. Pilot Officer Robert Walsh, RAF Biggin Hill, disappeared near Rouen, age 25. From Cardiff. 3 confirmed kills against Me-109s. September 12th. Flying Officer Anthony Pierce, RAF Northolt, disappeared near Abbeville, age 22, from Southampton. His mother had written him 17 letters in August alone. Tommy had seen them stacked in Pierce's footlocker. 12 pilots briefed, 7 returned, 5 vanished. The Abwehr was hunting. And then James Richardson had arrived at RAF Manston on September 13th, carrying papers identifying him as a Spitfire pilot transferred from RAF Biggin Hill, the same base where Robert Walsh had disappeared 4 days earlier. Richardson was good. Very good. He knew aircraft specifications. He knew radio protocols. He knew the names of squadron leaders and wing commanders. He knew the layout of Biggin Hill well enough to describe the mess hall, the operations room, even the latrine locations. His Midlands accent was flawless, neither too thick nor too refined, exactly the kind of speech pattern you'd expect from someone who'd grown up in Derby or Nottingham. He'd flown 3 combat missions over the past 4 days without incident. Shot down 1 Focke-Wulf 190 on September 15th. Confirmed kill, witnessed by 2 other pilots. Returned safely each time, filed proper reports, attended briefings. But Tommy had been watching. Richardson drank his tea without milk. Not unusual, plenty of pilots drank it black. But Richardson held his teacup wrong, thumb on the outside of the handle, not hooked through it. A small detail, meaningless on its own. Richardson wore his service cap slightly too far forward. Again, not conclusive, but combined with the tea. And now this salute. Tommy had spent 5 years watching RAF pilots salute, hundreds of them, thousands of salutes, and he'd never seen one quite like Richardson's. It was perfect in form, but wrong in rhythm. British military salutes had a certain casual inevitability to them. The hand rose smoothly, paused at the peak, descended with almost lazy precision. Richardson's salute was different, sharper, more angular. The kind of salute that suggested different training, the kind of salute that suggested Wehrmacht training. That evening, after Richardson left the debriefing room, Tommy went to the station intelligence officer, squadron leader Patricia Hammond, 38 years old, formerly a schoolteacher from Hampshire, now responsible for security at RAF Manston. "I need to speak with you about Flying Officer Richardson," Tommy said quietly. Hammond looked up from her paperwork. "The new pilot. What about him?" "I think he might be German." The words hung in the air like smoke. Hammond set down her pen carefully. "That's an extraordinary accusation, Flight Lieutenant. What evidence do you have?" Tommy explained. "The salute, the teacup, the cap position." He knew how it sounded, paranoid, reaching, desperate to find patterns where none existed. Hammond listened without interruption. When he finished, she was silent for 30 seconds. "It's not enough," she finally said. "We can't arrest a pilot based on how he drinks tea. We need proof." "Then let me get proof." "How?" Tommy had been thinking about this all afternoon. "I'll test him. Ask questions only a real RAF pilot would know. Not the obvious ones, not aircraft speeds or squadron numbers, the small things, the details that don't appear in any intelligence briefing." Hammond considered. "You have 24 hours. If he passes your test, we forget this conversation. If he fails..." She didn't finish the sentence. "Be careful, Tommy. If you're right, he's extremely dangerous. If you're wrong, you could destroy an innocent man's career." The next morning, September 18th, 1944, Tommy arranged to walk with Richardson from the mess hall to the flight line. 07:00 hours. Morning sun breaking through low clouds, smell of aviation fuel and fresh rain on concrete. "Beautiful morning for flying," Tommy said casually. "Indeed," Richardson replied. "Better than yesterday." They walked in silence for a moment. Then Tommy asked his first question. Did you know Flight Officer Walsh at Biggin Hill? Robert Walsh? Richardson nodded. Briefly. Quiet fellow. Didn't socialize much. Wrong answer. Tommy had never mentioned Robert Walsh's first name. He'd only said Walsh. A real RAF pilot from Biggin Hill might have asked, which Walsh? Or Bob Walsh? Or even don't know him. But Richardson had immediately supplied the first name. Information he shouldn't have had unless he'd studied captured documents. Tommy kept his voice steady. What did you think of the new navigation procedures they implemented in July? Sensible changes, Richardson said, made route planning more efficient. Wrong answer again. There had been no new navigation procedures in July. Tommy had made it up. A real pilot would have questioned it, asked for clarification, or admitted ignorance. Richardson had simply agreed, covering his lack of knowledge with vague praise. They reached the flight line. Spitfires lined up wing to wing, mechanics crawling over them like ants. I was sorry to hear about Morrison, Tommy said quietly. Morrison? David Morrison. From Edinburgh. You must have crossed paths with him at Tangmere before your transfer to Biggin Hill. Richardson's face remained neutral. Can't say I knew him personally. Tommy felt his pulse quicken. He'd never said Morrison was from Edinburgh, never mentioned Tangmere. Richardson had just confirmed he knew details about a pilot who'd disappeared, details that weren't in any official reports yet. Right, Tommy said slowly. Must have been thinking of someone else. They parted ways. Richardson headed toward his Spitfire. Tommy headed straight back to Squadron Leader Hammond's office. He found her reviewing reconnaissance photographs. I need to speak with you, now. 10 minutes later, Hammond picked up the phone and called RAF Intelligence Headquarters in London. 20 minutes after that, 2 MI5 officers were en route to Manston by staff car. Estimated arrival, 90 minutes. Keep him here, Hammond instructed. Don't let him fly, don't let him leave the base, and for God's sake, don't tell him anything's wrong. Tommy returned to the operations room where Richardson was preparing for the morning sortie. Change of plans, Tommy said, forcing a casual tone. Group captain wants all pilots in the briefing room. New intelligence about German fighter concentrations over Calais. Richardson checked his watch. Now? Immediately. They walked together to the briefing room. Tommy's hands were sweating inside his uniform gloves. If Richardson suspected anything, if he panicked, if he ran. The briefing room was empty except for 2 armed RAF regiment guards, positioned there 10 minutes earlier on Hammond's orders. Richardson stopped in the doorway. His eyes swept the room. No other pilots, no briefing materials, just 2 guards and Tommy. For 3 seconds, nobody moved. Then Richardson's hand dropped toward his service revolver. Don't, Tommy said quietly. The guards raised their rifles. Richardson's hand froze. His face remained expressionless, but something shifted behind his eyes. A calculation, a decision being made at inhuman speed. His hand moved away from the revolver, slowly raised. The surrender gesture was universal. I'm unarmed, he said. The Midlands accent was gone. In its place, flawless High German. I claim protection under the Geneva Convention as a member of the Wehrmacht. The MI5 officers arrived 30 minutes later. Richardson, whose real name was Hauptmann Klaus Richter, of the Luftwaffe's Intelligence Division, was taken into custody without resistance. The interrogation lasted 6 days. Richter revealed everything, not out of cooperation, but because MI5 already had enough evidence to hang him as a spy, and he knew it. In exchange for life imprisonment instead of execution, he provided details of the entire operation. Operation Falkengriff, Falcon's Grip. 19 Luftwaffe pilots, all fluent in English, all extensively trained in RAF procedures, had been infiltrating Allied airfields across France and England since late August. Their mission: gather intelligence on bomber routes, fighter tactics, and, most critically, the locations and timing of supply drops to French resistance networks. 7 RAF pilots had been killed during the identity theft process, not captured, killed. Shot in temporary holding cells at abandoned airfields behind German lines, their bodies buried in unmarked graves near Amiens. Michael Chen had died on September 3rd at 16:20 hours, single gunshot, back of the head, buried in a forest 3 kilometers south of the town of Doullens. Richter provided coordinates. Tommy requested permission to join the recovery team. It was denied. Civilians and non-combat personnel weren't authorized for operations in forward areas. Instead, he received a terse telegram 3 weeks later. Remains identified. Full military burial arranged. Condolences. Chen was buried at Cambridge City Cemetery on October 12, 1944. Tommy attended. 16 people present. Chen's parents, his fiancée, some squadron members, a priest who'd never met Chen and read from a prepared script. Afterward, Tommy stood at the grave for an hour, rain soaking through his uniform. Nobody told him to leave. "I found him," Tommy whispered to the headstone. "Not you, but the man who knew what happened to you. It's not enough, it'll never be enough, but it's something." Based on Richter's information, MI5 identified and arrested 11 more infiltrators over the next 6 weeks. 8 in England, 3 in France, all Luftwaffe intelligence officers, all posing as Allied pilots using stolen identities. 7 more RAF pilots were recovered, all dead, all buried in unmarked graves in northern France. The remaining 7 infiltrators were never found. Presumably they escaped back to Germany as the front lines collapsed, or died in the chaotic final months of the war. Operation Falkengriff had failed, but the cost was devastating. 14 RAF pilots murdered, their identities stolen, their memories used as weapons against their own squadrons. Tommy Ashford received no medal, no commendation, no public recognition. His report was classified most secret and buried in MI5 archives. Squadron leader Hammond wrote a brief note in his service record. Demonstrated exceptional observational skills and initiative in security matter. Recommended for intelligence duties. The note was stamped, filed, and forgotten. After the war ended in May 1945, Tommy remained in the RAF for another year, then requested discharge. He returned to Nottinghamshire, got a job as a clerk at the local council office, married a woman named Dorothy in 1947, had 2 daughters, lived in a small terraced house on Willow Street, bowled for the local cricket club on Sundays. He never mentioned Klaus Richter, never mentioned Michael Chen, never mentioned Operation Falkengriff. When people asked what he'd done during the war, he'd say, "Ground crew, nothing exciting, just kept the planes flying." In 1987, a researcher at the Imperial War Museum named Dr. Sarah Pemberton was cataloguing recently declassified MI5 documents when she found the file on Operation Falkengriff. She tracked down Tommy Ashford, by then 72 years old, retired, living in the same house on Willow Street. She knocked on his door on a Tuesday afternoon. February rain, cold wind. "Mr. Ashford, I'm researching a German intelligence operation from 1944. Your name appears in some classified documents. I was wondering if I could ask you a few questions." Tommy stood in the doorway for a moment. Then, "You'd better come in." They talked for 3 hours. Tommy showed her the single photograph he'd kept, himself and Michael Chen playing cards in the mess hall, taken by another pilot in July 1944. Chen was laughing at something off camera. Tommy was looking at his cards, smiling slightly. "He was going to open a restaurant," Tommy said quietly. "Chinese food and English breakfast, best of both worlds." Dr. Pemberton included Tommy's story in her 1989 book, Silent Warriors, Unrecognized Intelligence Officers of World War II. 23 pages. Chapter 7. Properly footnoted, academically rigorous. The book sold 847 copies. Tommy Ashford died on March 15, 1998, age 83. Peacetime death, heart failure. Dorothy was with him. So were his daughters. His obituary in the Nottingham Post was 4 sentences long. Thomas Ashford, 83, died peacefully at home, served in the RAF during World War II, worked for Nottinghamshire County Council for 31 years, survived by wife Dorothy, daughters Jennifer and Susan, and 5 grandchildren. No mention of Klaus Richter, no mention of Operation Falkengriff. No mention of 14 murdered pilots whose killer he'd identified through a fraction too crisp salute. There's a small display at the RAF Museum in Hendon, 3rd floor, eastern corner, easy to miss, a single panel dedicated to intelligence and security operations. Tommy's photograph is there, a grainy service portrait from 1944, 24 years old, serious expression, RAF uniform. Caption: Flotille to Thomas Ashford, whose observational skills led to the exposure of a major German infiltration operation, September 1944. No visitors stop to read it on most days, but Michael Chen's name is inscribed on panel 274 at the Runnymede Memorial, which commemorates over 20,000 Commonwealth aircrew who died during World War II and have no known grave. His name is there forever, carved in Portland stone overlooking the Thames Valley. Tommy used to visit once a year, always September 3rd. The day Chen disappeared, he'd stand there for 20 minutes, not praying. Tommy wasn't religious, just standing, remembering, bearing witness. The last time he visited was September 3rd, 1997. He was 82 then, and the stairs to the memorial were difficult. Dorothy helped him up. They stood together at panel 274. Best of both worlds, Tommy said quietly to Chen's name. That's what you wanted. If this story moved you, if you believe that people like Tommy Ashford deserve to be remembered, hit that like button. These stories survive only because viewers like you share them. Subscribe to this channel so you never miss another forgotten hero from World War II. And comment below. Tell us if you've ever noticed a tiny detail that changed everything. Tell us where you're watching from. Tell us if someone in your family served and came home with stories they never told. Thank you for keeping these memories alive. Thank you for bearing witness.